Good afternoon, everybody. We are just waiting a few more minutes for the rest of our participants to join us, and then we will kick off this afternoon's webinar. We'll give it another minute or two. I see quite a few participants still joining us. So we'll start in a few minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. As I briefly just mentioned, still waiting for a few people to join us, but I think we can get started. It's a wonderful opportunity this afternoon to once again just celebrate the partnership of South Africa and in the EU, where we are sharing insights around the market opportunities in circular plastics. We have experts from South Africa, we have experts from Europe, and we are really looking forward to just sharing insights and looking for synergies and growing and learning together. So from my side, I'm Silne Pinaar, I'm the Head of Communications at Green Cape. We are the Secretariat for the South African Plastics Pact. We are the host for this afternoon session, and we are very excited to just share a series of presentations with you from experts in the field. I will just quickly run us through the program of this afternoon's events. You will see that we have a program that is structured around 3 themes. We are looking at reusable packaging, we are looking at recycling to produce high quality products, and we are looking at post-consumer recycled content in primary packaging. And how we have structured the session this afternoon is we will have Kirsten Barnes from Green Cape in the South African context. Then we will have our colleagues from Europe. We have Francois Monet. We have with us also Gerard Klein-Nagelvoort. We have with us Fabrizio De Gregorio. I will introduce them properly before they speak. I will read you their biographies so that you can see the levels of expertise that we have in the room. And from our side, we are really excited to also just see your chats, your engagements in the chat session. And you are also most welcome to put your Q&As, your questions in the Q&A box so that we can address them later on in the session, or we will be able to get back to your questions at the end of this session. So without any further ado, from our side, we are so thankful to have with us our EU SA Partners for Growth from Team Europe South Africa, again on this fruitful initiative, as well as our partners at the World Bank Group, both of these partners making this afternoon session possible. So I'm not going to take up a lot more of our time in terms of opening remarks. I would rather hand over to Leonie Gross, EU Commission DG Environment. She's a policy officer for multilateral environmental cooperation. And as I stop sharing my screen, I'm going to ask you to please join us on screen, Leonie, and afterwards we will introduce Joshua. Thank you for being with us. We're looking forward to your opening comments.
Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Perfect. The screens are on as well. First of all, I would like to thank Green Cape for the kind invitation and for the opportunity given to summarize a bit to all of you the End Plastic Pollution Resolution made by the 5th United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 5.2. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think the problem is pretty well known. Plastics is a very handy material, but at time we're not using it sanely. So plastic pollution is a growing global problem. And there is regulatory and governance gaps that we as EU, amongst others, are currently focusing on, and particularly in the upstream part of the plastic life cycle. So product design, production, there's a lot of these gaps. Next slide, please. So the UNEA addresses this issue of plastic pollution ever since 2014, but ahead of UNEA 5.2 this year, there was particular enthusiasm. We had 140 countries calling for a global agreement on plastic pollution. We had several proposals from different nations, and eventually we did come to an agreement. Again, next slide. Thanks. So to summarize a bit the content of this agreement, the UNEA resolution calls to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee, an INC. So a committee that will have these negotiations to come to a plastic agreement. But the content of this agreement has been already pretty well outlined by the mandate given in the resolution. So we already know that this agreement will have to be legally binding, that it will have to address the whole life cycle of the plastic products, that it will address all kinds of environments, so not only marine plastic pollution, but also land-based plastic pollution, as we now know that about 80% of marine plastic litter stems actually from land sources. And then that it will have to be concluded by 2024. This is an ambitious goal, we are very well aware, but this is actually what is needed right now because we are facing such an urgent problem. Next slide, please. So furthermore, what the mandate contains is that we need to promote sustainable production and consumption of plastics, as I already mentioned. This starts with the product design to make sure that products are as reusable as possible, that if not possibly otherwise, that they are recyclable as possible, and for the part that we cannot deal with otherwise, that we have sound management of waste. On the implementation side, there will be national action plans for all member states, and also the implementation itself is already outlined. Next slide, please. To go over some key elements, we have a monitoring and reporting mechanism that is already foreseen in the mandate, and also the obligation to work very closely together with science, but also socio-economists to seek advice and guidance to make sure that our agreement and our governance will be based on the most up-to-date data available, and also to make sure that these networks of scientists globally cooperate amongst each other and exchange amongst each other as well. And then regarding finance, there's of course the need to exploit fully existing financial mechanisms and funds, but also to involve as much as possible private sector funding. Next slide, please. So how do we get to this agreement? First of all, we do have an open-ended working group scheduled for the 30th of May already, so very soon, in Dakar, Senegal. And there we're going to talk logistics, finance, set the work program for the upcoming INCs. Then the first INC will be held already this year, late this year, concrete date and venue yet to be confirmed. And then there's also going to be a stakeholder forum to make sure that we have the perspectives of different kinds of stakeholders all feeding into these INC discussions. Again, the form of the forum is yet to be set. So whether this will be a one-time event, whether there will be a report, whether there will be a series of fora, maybe somehow coupled to the single INC rounds, yet to be established. And next slide, please. Not to hold you much longer, but to have a quick look at the challenges of this negotiation period. This is lying ahead of us. I already mentioned the date is very ambitious, of course, but needed. And then another big issue will be definitions. And we're already in contact with industry and hearing this more and more often as well, that we need to be very clear about what do we mean with certain basic terms, such as upstream, downstream, virgin plastics. So this will need to be defined somehow in the agreement. Then, of course, how to find ambitious obligations that are yet realistic for member states, but also for industry. And then still, we have a pandemic, so we need to see how we can possibly negotiate a global agreement, maybe in a hybrid form, maybe in the coming years in person again. This is to be seen. And the last slide, please. Oh, the next one. Yeah, thanks. So to end on a positive note, what are the opportunities of such an agreement? We now have a window to come together with a range of measures, legally binding and non-binding, to finally tackle this problem of global plastic pollution, marine and otherwise. We have, in the same way, the opportunity to make the plastic industry more circular, and I'm sure other panelists will have much more insight on that aspect. And then there will be aspects possibly beyond ending plastic pollution itself, but also hopefully positively impacting biodiversity, climate change, economic, as I'm saying, the circular option. And then last but not least, we will find a global response to a global threat, because plastic particles in the ocean, on the land, wherever, do not care for borders or for legislative competences. We have a global problem, and therefore we come together globally to solve it. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you, Leonie. It is so valuable for us to realize that the conversation that we're having today feeds into a bigger global conversation. Yeah, we welcome forthcoming engagements post this conversation, just towards this very important milestone, international global milestone. Thank you very much. Next up, we would love to hear from Joshua Pelfreman. He is a waste management specialist at the World Bank Group, also one of our partners for this afternoon session. Joshua, please join us. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. Joshua Pelfreman here from the World Bank Group. I work with quite a large team who are mostly based out of Pretoria. I myself am in Cape Town. And we've been working on a number of kind of solid waste management programs with Green Cape, with Kirsten, as well as with CSIR, and a number of other contractors in partnership with the National Treasury. We also have a number of programs that are starting up. We initially focused on kind of a circular economy roadmap, an analysis of plastic and polymer value chains, and then also a solid waste management diagnostic in each of the 8 metros of South Africa. We're also venturing out now into looking at carbon modeling, which the World Bank Group has quite a lot of experience with internationally, as well as a waste pickers registration in terms of reference that some of you might see in the near future. I'll just share a couple of slides on the PowerPoint so that you can see the branding and the logos of the World Bank program. We're divided in South Africa into 3 different program facilities. One is called TCAF, but the ones that are more familiar probably to the audience today are the City Support Program, and then ProBlue. City Support Program works quite closely, as well as TCAF, with the National Treasury. We are effectively working on behalf of the National Treasury. We're not a supply-led institution in South Africa. We have to be demanded and paid for by a local host, which differs from the way that we do programming in a number of other countries. And then we have ProBlue, which is kind of really focused on the ocean plastics issue and kind of the marine plastics issue. So, ProBlue has been the program that we've been working with Green Cape on, a number of issues. And even if it's kind of a landlocked city that we're looking at, ProBlue is looking at the relationship between a kind of a marine or a water body and ocean plastics pollution or plastic pollution. So if I just skip through this a little bit. So the three focus areas that we kind of focused on throughout 2021 and the first half of this year was a municipal solid waste management diagnostic across 8 metropolitan authorities in South Africa. We did a kind of a circular economy roadmap in South Africa, which is still ongoing with the CSIR. And then we've had kind of ongoing kind of relationship with Green Cape on plastics value chain analysis for all of the common polymers, as well as some pretty interesting special polymers for, construction and automobiles and some other advanced industries. So that's been really fun to work with them on. And then each one of these slides, I'll share this presentation afterwards, kind of demonstrates the terms of reference, which it was a public document. Some of you might have been familiar with kind of the World Bank portal. These documents were shared and kind of tendered openly in the middle of last year. So we had Advancing Circular Economy in South Africa, which is now being led by CSIR, the plastics value chain, which I spoke about through Green Cape. And then we had the Municipal Solid Waste Management Diagnostic, which is not on this slide deck, it seems, because it's part of the TCAF and the CSV program rather than ProBlue. Going forward in the next couple of months, we're going to be launching kind of in the next month or two, a large kind of a carbon kind of mitigation modeling study, tailored and focused to the solid waste management and organic waste recovery sector. And then there's going to be another one, which is going to try and ride on the back of the waste picker registration pilots that the CSIR and UJ and Wits University, a number of you will be familiar with, have been leading over the last year. There's another number of other kind of program initiatives that are coming out of ProBlue. And ProBlue is also kind of one of these major flagship World Bank programs. It operates right across the SADC as well as in West Africa and East Africa. So if you guys do have any questions, or if you have come across kind of ProBlue programming and you're interested in learning more, then I welcome you to get in touch with me, or if you have any questions on what the World Bank is doing in South Africa and how you could get involved or feed in inputs, please feel totally welcome to email or message me over this phone call. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua. And while Joshua was speaking, just the demonstration of partnership and the demonstration of ecosystem and the demonstration of the multi-stakeholder process to move this process forward stood out for me. So thank you again to the World Bank Group as well, and for the fantastic partnership and moving these conversations forward and getting the action on the ground. I think it's time for us to move into our the main reason why we are here this afternoon. And first up, it is my honor to introduce one of our special people at Green Cape, Dr. Kirsten Barnes. Kirsten is an expert circular economy analyst at Green Cape. And for most of you who know Green Cape, we are a not-for-profit organization, and we facilitate growth in the green and circular economy in South Africa. So Kirsten, with her team, leads the South African Plastics Pact initiative. And to our knowledge, it's the largest circular economy initiative with specific time-bound targets in South Africa at the moment. We, as the Green Cape team, we facilitate action on these ambitious circular economy targets with industry and supporting organizations, and it's across the value chain. As Joshua also mentioned, the SA Plastics Pact, we are very honored to be a member of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Plastic Pact network. So once again, the global context coming in. Kirsten has a PhD in biochemistry of wetland systems, and her passion for the material and chemical flows led her to the secondary materials economy, maximizing value from a material, economic and social perspective. I am going to hand over to Kirsten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silnet, and it's really great to be here today. And thank you also from my side to our partners and the Team Europe for South Africa on the call today, and the World Bank Group. So today I want to kick us off by looking at an overview of circularity of plastic packaging in South Africa and particularly opportunities in reusable packaging within this particular section of the webinar. So if we look at market opportunities in circular plastics in South Africa, first of all, we need to consider a circular economy for plastic packaging and what that might mean for the South African context. So we have some very good information on the potential in a circular economy for plastics, and in particular plastic packaging, which has been identified and described in global studies and certain modeling exercises. So we understand that there are both economic benefits as well as income opportunity benefits in the global context related to a circular economy for plastics. And we see that same messaging in developed and developing country settings. We do, however, need to consider our specific context in the southern tip of Africa. What does this mean for us in South Africa? So before we delve into some of the specifics of our plastic packaging, let's ask some big questions. So will there be real benefits in our context from a circular economy for plastics, and particularly considering a circular economy for plastic packaging in South Africa? How will the transition to a circular economy affect our GDP? And will there be a net job gain or loss? All very key questions in our context currently. So building on some of the global understanding and the understanding that we have from other developing country contexts in terms of the potential benefits in a circular economy, WWF has funded a study which was delivered by Pegasus Consulting and Circular Vision, which looked at modeling a circular economy for plastic packaging by 2050. So the project team used a computational general equilibrium model. Now this looks at a macroeconomic implications of certain scenarios. And the scenarios modeled were a linear economy, so basically our current economy and the development track to 2050, and then looking at a circular economy and what that might look at like in 2050. And then what the model results will give us relatively what are the benefits in a circular economy or not, relative to a linear economy. And the model constraints that the team used to model a circular economy for plastic packaging was by 2050, a reduction in consumption of single-use packaging by 30%, 50% substitution of virgin plastic for recycled plastic, and scaled reuse refill models in South Africa. What the modeling results showed is that if you look at the comparative between a linear economy and then a circular economy trajectory, is we see on a conservative growth path, we see increased economic activity by 2050 and a cumulative GDP growth of 2%, which translates into an additional $7.8 billion in GDP in a circular economy relative to a linear economy by 2050. The model also gave the results of increased income opportunities. So increased demand for both skilled and unskilled labor, which is very key in our context. We do need to consider the circular economy designed for South Africa that is very inclusive. So basically, if I look at these modeling results, so modeling the potential additional growth and benefits. So GDP, we see extra economic growth, we see increased demand, increased income opportunities in a circular economy. If we plan to stay on the current linear economy trajectory, and maybe we do build in some extra efficiencies, we're actually planning to limit our GDP growth, and we're planning to limit income opportunities in plastic packaging in South Africa. So we see on a macroeconomic level, the potential of a circular economy for plastic packaging to give us extra economic growth and income creation. Now, this is macroeconomic modeling. So obviously it depends on individual businesses, sectors, organizations, in terms of how well those businesses are placed to take advantage of the value that we could see in a circular economy for plastic packaging in South Africa. So then, if we're talking about a circular economy for plastic packaging in South Africa, what is the current state of our circularity? And you see on screen, we're only mentioning recyclability here. And this is because currently in South Africa, the largest and in some cases the only circular economy activity currently in plastic packaging is in the recycling space. And you'll see from the circular economy diagram we'll present later that the circular economy is clearly not only recycling, but this just gives us a snapshot. What are we working with in plastic packaging in South Africa currently? And very important when we consider recyclability, and you can see from our range of recyclability we have presented here. So from the range of recyclability, it's very important that we not only look at a technical recyclability, but we look at how recyclable packaging is, or particular packaging formats, how recyclable are they in our South African context? So considering the whole value chain, does the packaging which is placed on the market, does it actually reach recycling plants, and is it actually recycled into another product? And that's what we're getting a sense of here. So if you can see that currently placed on the market in South Africa, these are our 2019 figures. I've used 2019 figures throughout this presentation because, as we know, 2020 was a bit of a curveball. So I'm using 2019 as a better picture currently that we're now seeing recovery from the year of 2020. So in terms of the plastic packaging placed on the market in South Africa, what we currently see is that 48% is sitting at a greater than 30% output recycling rate in South Africa. So that means that of the packaging placed on the market in these categories, 30% is effectively recycled into a new product. And as one of our Plastic Pact members points out to us regularly, 30% is not a good or even really an adequate recycling rate. It is a word we've chosen for this though. So what is a greater concern in terms of moving towards circularity in plastic packaging in South Africa is that 30% of our packaging is currently either not recycled, so not recyclable in the country, or recycled at less than 15% output recycling rate. So these are points of concern, but yet we can also flip that on its head and say these are opportunities that we see in the South African space. And clearly there's also opportunities within the 22% that is recycled between 15 and 29%. And here we see some very good potential to quite rapidly grow that recycling rate for those formats now that we have additional funding coming into the system through our mandatory extended producer responsibility system. So that gives us a quick snapshot of the current state of circularity and of plastic packaging in South Africa. So in terms of our circular economy opportunities, so we've mentioned that recycling as that big outer loop is not the only circular economy intervention. And what we see in South Africa is that conversation has at times, based on a circular economy or referencing a circular economy, has at times been constrained to recycling or even waste management. But what we want to present today is that a circular economy is a system design, and it's a system designed to really value the plastics that we use, that we place on the market, and that are useful in our economy. So we want to design those plastic for multiple possible uses. So I'm going to focus on the value chain from the design phase. We haven't highlighted renewably sourced virgin feedstock as a short to medium term, so within the next 5 to sort of 6 or 7 years for local production in South Africa, but it's something which does need to be considered. So first of all, what we're looking at, and really to set up our opportunities really well in terms of circular economy opportunities for plastic packaging, is we really need to redesign for circularity. And very important, we're now saying redesign for circularity, because in some senses, our design for recycling mindset has designed for only one additional life through our economy. And actually we want to design for multiple lives for that plastic. How are we really valuing our plastics that we can retain them through multiple life cycles through our economy? So we need to think of also designing for recyclability for a maximum number of lifetimes and designing for recycled content. Then we also want to look at opportunities in reuse and refill models in South Africa. So here's where we're looking at taking plastic packaging and refilling it with product. So it could be the same product that you bought in that plastic packaging, or it could be another plastic packaging that another container that you take to the store and refill with the product that you're buying, whether it be a dishwashing liquid or a pasta, whatever it might be, certain goods. So we're looking at refill models as potential circular economy. And then also we need to think of, at the end of use of our plastic packaging, we need to think of specific opportunities to maximize circularity. So that's looking at recovery and separation at source. We need to consider our current recycling capacity, as well as looking at improved recycled quality. And then finally, we're looking at the demand side. So we need to close that loop. So what that means is we're taking packaging at end of life and designing it and recovering it and recycling it to be included into new packaging, and also designing for other end markets for high value products. So these are end markets that are monopolymer plastics. We're not looking at plastic mixes, and they are products which have a high value at the end of their life, the end of their use. So we can think of, for example, irrigation pipe in the agricultural sector, which maintains a high quality and can itself be recycled. So these are the specific market opportunities that we are considering today. So if we move into now specifically reuse and refill models, what does that look like in the South African context? What is the potential in reuse refill? And some of the first framing work looking globally at the potential in reuse refill models was highlighted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in 2017 in their New Plastics Economy publication looking at catalyzing action. And in this report, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation considered a total reuse potential of the global plastic packaging market, looking at shifting 20% by weight of plastic packaging to reuse models. The size of this opportunity in both material savings as well as additional economic opportunity was scoped at $9 billion globally in 2017, actually using 2016 exchange rates, or looking at 2016 market value. So if we look at, and these are the formats that have been particularly highlighted through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation model. But what we need to look at, so if we look at the potential globally, it's not only the Ellen MacArthur Foundation report, which has highlighted reuse as an excellent market opportunity in a circular economy for plastic packaging. We see now the recognition that reuse is a very key component of a circular economy for plastic packaging. This is because in that reuse component, the plastic packaging is maintained at a very high material value, and it's often retained in a model where there's incentive to keep that packaging circulating. So it's maintained at a very high value, and there's economic opportunities involved in the circulating of that material. Also very important for reuse is there's often inbuilt incentives to recover that packaging material at end of life. So we get a much better recovery in specific reuse models than you might get in, for example, a recycling model. So reuse has been highlighted as a very important component, and we now see in policy and legislation certain targets, particularly in the EU, where there are now reuse targets included. And we also see on the commercial side, in the corporate sector, commitments from companies like Coca-Cola, as well as in conversation, we've been chatting to our UK Plastics Pact colleagues, and a number of the big retailers in the UK have now publicly made reuse targets related to the percentage by weight of the packaging that they have on sale. So we can see globally that there's a lot of movement towards reuse. So we can understand that there's something of a universal sort of application of the concept of reuse. But what does that look like in our specific context in South Africa? How do we translate that? And will the design look different in terms of our reuse models? So in terms of looking at focus areas for reuse, what we're particularly looking at, and this has been discussed extensively in the South African Plastics Pact Action Group. The South African Plastics Pact includes organizations across the value chain, from resin producers to packaging manufacturers, brand owners, retailers, recyclers, as well as key supporting members like our producer responsibility organizations and Plastics SA, the African Circular Economy Network, to give you a snapshot. So in terms of our focus areas, and these have been further discussed with additional experts in the development of this work for the World Bank study, we've highlighted the need to design inclusive reuse models. So if in our context we rapidly scale reuse refill models, we would avoid a section of the downstream value chain from the smaller collectors, be they informal or formal, to recyclers. There'd be quite a rapid shift in material away from those sectors. So we need to consider an inclusive design and reuse models. In our context, there are many locations, many markets within South Africa that are quite far from recycling plants, which means that packaging from these contexts is very rarely recovered. So highly likely to end up in landfill and even leaked into the environment. We've also identified on-the-go packaging as a particular focus area in terms of innovative reuse models. This is often highly leaked into the environment. And then also looking at packaging, which is currently poorly recycled in our context. Looking at the low to the not recyclable, the very poorly recycled packaging in our context. We don't have good information currently on the on-the-go packaging component. So what we focused here in terms of opportunities is looking at markets which are very far from recycling plants. So these are areas which we're assuming, and we actually can confirm, that there's very little to any recovery of packaging from these markets, will end up in landfill or leach into the environment. So we're looking at some of the higher value rigid packaging and some of the products that are easier to translate into reuse models. And just to note that 2 of these formats particularly lend themselves well to reuse refill models in the business-to-business context. In the PP buckets, this could be in chemicals, this could be in paint, certain non-hazardous chemicals, this could be in edible oils, so etc. There's a number of options possible in PP buckets and HDP drums. And then you could think of a logistics where the supply then recovers, the supply of product will then recover the previous supplied container. There are obviously quite a few specifics to iron out in such a model, but there's potential in the B2B model there. In the business to consumer model for the other formats that you see on screen, apart from the Coca-Cola model, which has extensive logistics to recover, wash the bottle centrally, refill and redistribute, what we see in the other formats is a very high potential for business to consumer model where the consumer retains ownership of their own container and is incentivized to reuse that container and to ideally bring it back end of life. So in terms of what we see currently, the previous slide that I showed you was 10% of the market in 2025 in tons per year. So that's around close to 16,000 tons in the PT beverage as an example. If we model that each container is used at least 12 times, we see a reduction in weight, obviously in packaging sold onto the market. And we're emphasizing in any reuse model, there needs to be incentive for the recovery of that packaging end of life to then move that packaging into the recycling value chain and have a resupply of a reusable packaging format. What is the potential here? We see much higher value in reusable containers. So obviously my weight calculations don't really translate here. But as with any system, what we should be seeing in recycling, when you design a reusable container, you're designing for the whole system. You're designing for the filling, for the transport, for the use phase, for the recovery phase, for the washing phase, and for the refill phase. So it's a much sturdier design. We also see reduction of a certain tonnage. So here estimated 24,000 tons of packaging and recovery of an additional 1,300 tons for recycling, which is unlikely to have been recovered previously. So here we see a double win in terms of the packaging that is supplied in this area. We do get additional back in recovery for recycling. In terms of, and this is my final slide for my timekeeper, in terms of reuse models in the circular economy. So reuse models are highlighted as an important intervention to achieve a circular economy. And not only is the potential to limit plastic pollution and to really achieve circularity in plastic packaging limited without scaling reuse models, reuse also specifically constitutes economic opportunities. So with reuse models for the materials, we're able to maintain packaging at its highest value. So that's really valuing the plastics we place on the market if we were using reusable plastic packaging. For the value chain, we see economic opportunities, and in our context, we do need to emphasize inclusive design. For producers, it is noted worldwide that well-designed reuse models do get a better recovery in plastic packaging. So specifically in areas where it's very difficult to access plastic packaging, this is an excellent approach in order to recover and assist producers in meeting their EPR targets. And then for consumers, we're able to see delivery of product cheaper because you're not paying for the packaging with each delivery of product, with each purchase of product. And we see excellent examples of this in Latin America through companies such as Algramo and Ecocarga. So basically for us, in terms of scaling reuse refill, and it is now a particular focus of a South African Plastics Pact Action Group, we need to consider how do we define and design and scale effective reuse models in our context. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. As you see, there's a lot of work that's being done to, sorry, I'm echoing there, and Chris, there we go, thank you. A lot of work being done in the South African context to look into the economic opportunities in the reuse space. I will now want to invite Francois Monet to join us. He is the business unit manager for the Bulk for Brands initiative at Jean Bautier. And we are very excited to learn from their practical applications of this concept. But before Francois starts, I just want to give you a brief introduction. Francois has done a master's in food sciences, his specialty in R&D, and over the past 10 years, he has been working in multiple sectors, from transformation, equipment, ingredients, packaging, and he says he's always been around food products or beverages. Francois has a background that covers all of these bases, and within that context, his role to help brands switch to a refill or to a bulk model with their products is highly valuable, and we look forward to hearing your insights. Thank you, Francois.
Thank you for your introduction. Thank you for the invitation. So it's a more practical presentation that I will give you. So just to give you an idea of what we do in France and in almost 30 countries now with our partners, on how to reuse plastic, how we can build a circular economy. We are very engaged at Jean Bouteille against single-use packaging in general. So we are not against plastic, we're not against glass, we're not against metal. Every packaging has its advantages and its drawbacks. So we just try to use them the smartest we can. So just to give you an idea of what we do, at Jean Bouteille, we work with suppliers and producers to make them switch from prepackaged products to prepackaged products and bulk products, or just switch to bulk, which is fairly rare to be fair with you. It's important to work with them from the beginning to the end. So that's why my background is important. That case. So we work with them directly to make sure that they are in the right packaging to fit our dispensers. We build the dispensers, we supply the dispensers, and we also help them through couple of ideas on how to work with the customer journey, how to work with the end packaging, also what to look for, what to choose, where to go. So that's the whole service we do. We are not a dispenser supplier. We are a solution provider for people that wants to change and bring an alternative to their customers. We've been working on that for about 8 years. Got a lot of work with local authorities, with European authorities, to change laws, to make things happen, in order to keep on working on what we do and provide not a solution but an alternative. The perfect solution hasn't been found yet. So just to give you an idea, we work with about 1,100 now, 1,100 stores, with about 10,000 dispensers installed. So we are a one-stop shop, because that was the problem, and that's the problem that everyone is going to face when they're going to try to go circular, is that you have to have the whole environment ready. So you have to have the suppliers and the producers that are ready to switch for some type of bulk packaging. You have to find the dispensing solution, and then you have to find the right final package, which is also tricky. So it's a whole thing. So that's why we did it all ourselves, because in order to supply the dispensers, we needed to have products to put in and stores ready to accept them and people ready to work with that. France is very dynamic in terms of bulk sales and refills. So it's easier for us to work in France than other countries that are a little more difficult. Today, we supply about 80 products. So we have about 30 or 35 industrial partners that package different products into the format that we chose. And that became a standard in France. So it's anything between food products, cosmetic products, or detergents. And that's the Jean Bouteille work. And for 2 years now, we've been working with brands to give them our know-how, work with our standard dispensers, but customize them for them in order to give them the opportunity to go more circular. So we have, I'll go quickly on that because that's not the interest of the presentation. But we have two types of dispensers. One is a very low-tech one, made for bulk stores, easily installable, very cheap, and just increase the serving capacities of bag-in-box. The second one is a little more automated and more on optimizing the bag-in-box service, but for thicker products, because some products are just more complicated to serve with our dispenser than others. And some are just impossible for now. A couple of examples of what we do or what it looks like in the stores. So you have 4 different examples, 2 being in retail, 1 being in bulk stores, and the other one being one of the brand partners that we have. So on the left, you can see 2 installations in 2 Waitrose in the UK, and the other one is Deleuze in Belgium, if I'm not mistaken, with the brand Ecover, part of the SC Johnson Group. So it's called Method in other countries for the brand. So it's laundry liquid and washing liquid in general, detergents, and we've installed directly into a retailer aisle the fontaines plus the branding around it. So you buy your prepackaged bottle, you use it at home, bring it back to the store, and you pay the fact to refill it. So there's no control over the quantity or over the weight. It's a refill system. So you bring your empty bottles and you leave the store with the bottle full, and you just pay for the fact to refill it. Compared to what you see on the right, the third picture, it's in a bulk store. So what they do is they will tear the packaging, they will fill the packaging in the store, and they will recheck the weight and deduce the weight of the packaging just in order to pay for the product and not the packaging itself. What's important for us is that this type of packagings are designed for refill. And the fourth one is more luxury option, but it's the same dispensers that you find in the 3 other pictures. It just placed into a very nice wood furniture, but the same thing. You buy an empty bottle, like it's an empty aluminum bottle, and then you bring it back to the store when it's used. And of course, we follow. That's why you see a screen on every picture. That's where we help customer to do the customer journey, and there's also a printer there that will print a label with all the legal information that you need, the price, the batch numbers, the INCI, the formulas, and everything. So that's just a couple of examples of what we do. I wanted to highlight 3 things on what we do with plastics today at Jean Bouteille. So one example is our packaging that we use, and that's a standard that we try to push, and we pushed in France with distributors and producers. We want them to fill 10-liter bag-in-box pouches that are very efficient in terms of service in our dispensers, very adapted to what we do, and became the standard for most dispensers, maybe ours or others. The good thing about this type of packaging compared to, let's say, stainless steel or glass packaging is that it's easily industrializable. So you can buy lines for fairly, for less amount of money that you would buy in a filling line for prepackaged products. But it's easily available. It's easy to find a line to fill these type of products in France or in Europe. For us, it has all the barrier that we need to protect the product, and it's very, very efficient in terms of logistics compared to what we can find in prepackaged goods. So that's what we use today as a base packaging. It's not what we try to push in a way, it's what we try to promote today as the best solution that we find. And compared to packaged products, if you buy a bottle and you refill it with our system, you will save 95% of plastic because you already have the bottle, and the bag-in-box are very, very light. So we have an impact of about 100 grams of plastic per 10 liters. So 10 grams per liter of plastic, which is 95% less than what a prepackaged product can be. So that's how we use plastic and how we take the best out of plastic. Of course, these bag-in-boxes have a barrier. It's a EVOH, which is now recyclable in France in most of the big cities. So that's one thing that we don't have to worry too much about now. This type of materials become more and more recyclable before they are reusable, which is easily cleanable, but there's no possibility to dry them. So that's where we are at right now. We are trying to push and wait for somebody to find a way to reuse them. And then we will have a better way of doing things. The second example I wanted to push forward is the consumer packaging. So there's a lot of our customers that use glass, or will use aluminum bottles or stainless steel bottles in some products. What we do at Jean Bouteille and what we push today is glass bottles for some products, but also plastic bottles for laundry products and more cosmetic products. The advantage is that it's fairly cheap. It's very easy to get. It's very easy to get molds for adaptable or more concrete solution, because we need specific bottles in terms of size of the neck because it needs to be cleanable easily, and we need to customize them quite a lot, and that they stay clean and looking good from one service to another one. That's one of the issues we have with aluminum, for example, that is easily scratched, and the bottle doesn't look as nice after a few rounds of cleaning and using. The other thing is that it stays translucent. So when you try to fill a bottle that is not transparent, you need to have a lot of automation to check the weight or the volume that you've already put in the bottle in order to not overflow. With these plastic bottles, it's very easy to follow where you are in terms of level in the bottle. And compared to glass, we have a lot of questions from people that have kids or use this product in the bathroom. If it falls, it breaks in your tub. If it's glass, it can be very dangerous compared to plastic that still has this advantage of not breaking. And if it breaks, it's not gonna tear into a million pieces that can hurt you. So that's what we see as a good way of applying plastics in what we do today. And the third one is an example that we working with a company called Farm, in a retailer called Farm in Belgium, and also in France with some of our retailers. They have such high volumes in terms of dishwashing liquid or laundry liquid that they wanted the solution with much more volume. Instead of filling and keep on changing bag-in-boxes every day or every half day, they wanted a solution with bigger volume. So we brought them a reusable, reclickable, refillable HG drum. So it's 220 liters of laundry liquid, but that's what a good bulk store sells in about 2 weeks in France or Belgium. So that's one solution that we brought, being fully circular, This drum is easily available. It's very sturdy, very easy to ship, very easy to clean and refill. The only issue we face with this product is, of course, making it easily movable in the stores. So that's where it's still a little bit complicated. But other than that, that's a very fully circular and very efficient way of using plastic packaging. So like I said, we have about 1,000 partner shops today. So it's not an experiment anymore. We are 40 people to live thanks to Jean Bouteille. We work there every day. We work with more and more brands. For example, L'Occitane en Provence, it's a deployment in 25 countries with 100 stores right now. So it's something that is becoming a habit. It's not exceptional. It's becoming an habit. We are more now on 10,000 fontaines already installed, thanks to one partner in France that decided to go with us in retail with 1,300, so 1,300 fontaines to sell shower gels refills in retail. And over the past years, it's 1.4 million liters of liquid that we've sold. So it's something that is it's taking its place into retail. It's taking place for the customer, and it's getting there, and it's for us at least it's here to stay. Thank you for your attention.
This is so excellent. Thank you so much, Francois. And I think while you were speaking, I was also reminded of one of our first innovation challenges that we ran for the SA Plastics Pact. The winner was a refill solution water-powered by iDrop. And I think one of the Plastics Pact mottos is that small steps shift systems. And I think that's what you're demonstrating here is, if the design thinking is there, if the intention is there, if the will is there, it is completely possible to move towards a reuse and a refill solution for many products. So thank you so much for landing some of these theoretical, conceptual ideas into something that's very practical. And I think we look forward to facilitating further conversations to learn more and to be able to engage further and what is applicable in our context as well. Thank you, Francois.
Thank you
very
so much.
Insightful. Excellent. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll see that there are Q&As and chats going, and I want to encourage you to please engage with one another on these conversations, and where we can, we will address the questions in our conversation, or we will take note of them and address them after the webinar. So please feel free to engage. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see the engagement there. We're moving the theme from reuse into our recycling and recycled content. We'll combine these two concepts into one presentation from Kirsten will speak to us from the South African context once again on opportunities. Then we will move over into a presentation from Gerrit, and then we will go into a presentation from Fabrizio. So looking forward to hearing some insights around recycling and recycled content. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks so much, Solnit. And also, I don't know if you can see the Q&A. I think you can see the Q&A function. So before I launch into the next part of this webinar, looking at opportunities in growing recycling rates, and then moving on to opportunities and including recycled content and packaging. I see David has noted in the Q&A that recovery rates on reusables are higher than single use. But in terms of, you won't see an increase in tonnage collected because you put less material on the market in a reuse model. So definitely agreed. In terms of producers looking to achieve your EPR targets, there is greater recovery in reuse models in terms of the packaging you place on the market. So as a percentage of what you place on the market, you do get greater recovery. Happy to we can have further the conversations. I look forward to some good discussions. So in terms of opportunities to grow the recycling rate in plastic packaging, and in my first segment of my presentation, I did forget to thank the SA Plastics Pact action groups, who are, as I mentioned, representatives across the value chain in terms of plastic packaging, as well as specifically Annalie Pretorius from Plastics SA, who's been fantastic in supplying the data for these analyses and for the study. So if we move on and we look at the output recycling rate for packaging in 2019, and this is calculated from some of the information. So this is output recycling rate for packaging, particularly in 2019. So what you're seeing on screen is the results of our voluntary extended producer responsibility system in South Africa. So our mandatory extended producer responsibility system has come into play from the end of last year. And what you see on screen is particularly focused on the plastic packaging that has been calculated from our industry data. So in terms of what the voluntary EPR has achieved, we've seen some really impressive results through the voluntary EPR system, and some of which you can see on screen. But what we have noted in the last few years is a general lag in the recycling rate for plastics in South Africa. So the time is right for our mandatory extended producer responsibility system. So what we'll see with a mandatory EPR system is specifically EPR fees on packaging placed on the market in South Africa have to be designed to cover the collection, sorting, aggregation, recycling, and in our context in South Africa, also the inclusion of recycled content back into packaging for specific packaging formats. So we will see increased investment to grow this recycling rate. So in terms of what you can see on screen, we currently have an estimated recycling rate for LD across all packaging formats at 46%, followed by HD at around 43, 44%, which is largely driven by the HD beverage market, and PET across the board at 33%, with the PET beverage specifically sitting at around 41%. And PP in 2019, we saw at around a 29% output recycling rate, with polystyrene around 12%. And PVC, we currently don't have recyclers that are focusing on PVC packaging in the country. So what we do see is a pre-consumer recycling. So factory scrap, some off-spec packs, and any post-consumer, which also we're defining as post-industrial and post-commercial, that is currently recycled is sort of included in other industrial streams as almost an accidental inclusion currently. The size of the PVC packaging market is very small in South Africa. So what we can see on screen, and what I've graded across the polymer and the packaging formats that we see within that polymer, in general, on average, that we see the LD, the HD, and the PET packaging formats in South Africa on aggregate reach greater than 30% recycling rate, whereas PP is sitting at the 15 to 29%. As I've mentioned, it's around 29%, so very close to that 30% threshold, with polystyrene and PVC very poorly or not currently really recycled in South Africa. For the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus on those polymer packaging formats that sit greater than 15% recycling rates. We see these as the bigger opportunities within the sort of 5 to 8 years to achieve bigger tonnages effectively circulated through our economy. So that is going to be our focus. So if we go back to our circular economy diagram and look at where we are focusing for the next specific discussion of circular economy opportunities in plastic packaging, is here we're particularly going to look at the supply of recyclates to be made into other products. So we're looking at recovery, separation at source. As part of these opportunities, we'll consider recycling capacity, as well as, very importantly, improved recyclate quality. And I will qualify that to a greater degree as we go through the presentation. So if we look at supply of recyclates, so supply of material to be recycled in South Africa. So the supply of material to the recycling system is a very key part of this component. What you can see on screen is information from Statistics South Africa, the consumer survey published in 2018. And it's a consumer survey across consumers in our metropolitan municipalities. So these are our bigger municipalities with the largest proportion of our citizens living in these municipalities. The question asked in the survey was around, does the resident or does the consumer, the citizen, separate their waste in their household? So what you can see, this will likely be an inflated view of those that actually do get material to a recycling depot or a recyclables collection point or supply it to a collector. So what we can see, there's very poor separation at source in households in South Africa, with the best performer being Cape Town at 23% of consumers surveyed. And that gives you a picture that that Cape Town has the best sustained and the most extensive curbside recycling program through a municipality in South Africa, with the performance in other municipalities being lower than that in Cape Town, with a particularly low performance from Mangaung. So what we're seeing in terms of setting up our circular economy opportunities in recycling, separation at source, to have a high quality material to enter our recycling plants is a very key part of our interventions that we need to consider. And what we currently have is a very active informal sector. So what is sometimes called separation out of source is where we have the informal collectors, also called waste pickers or reclaimers, and accessing material off landfill, as well as recovering from general waste bins. So we get a huge proportion of our material, our packaging material, entering recycling plants in South Africa is accessed from a very mixed source. So therefore the levels of contamination are very high, which puts a big burden on the recyclers in terms of the recycled to be produced, and obviously has an effect on the quality of recycled we're able to produce. So the separation out of source, the informal sector in some streams have been estimated to access and recover around 80% of the material in certain streams that is entering our recycling plants. So this is very important to note, that although we have a failure in separation at source schemes, we have had developing entrepreneurially a separation out of source, which has accessed material to enter the recycling system. So we need to have a focus on inclusive system design, that those collectors and that system can be built upon and integrated to access better quality recycled going forward, or recyclables going forward. So moving on from looking at the supply and really setting up our opportunities well. And I think very important to note, and this is something that Fabrizio will also do a very specific sort of a piece on in his presentation, is looking at, when we're looking at supply of material to recycling plants, and I did reference it briefly up front, the design for recycling and design for circularity is very important to maximize our circular economy opportunities. We cannot look at a poor design, that meaning that packaging will have a very low value end of life, that makes it very unlikely to be recovered and enter into the recycling system. So to maximize our recycling opportunities, design is a very, very important component. And that design is a very key element of producers in the country being able to meet their collection and recycling targets in terms of EPR. So if we look at, and what the next graph is considering, what do we need to recycle as an output? So what is the additional tonnage of material we need to recycle by 2025 to meet EPR targets? So in terms of how we produce this graph in front of you, is that we know the current recycling rate, and particularly very specifically for PET, and we have an estimate of a range of recycling rates in the HDP formats, PP and LD formats. So looking at that range of recyclability and the particular recycling targets that are embedded in our EPR, what is the additional tonnage, assuming a market growth in general across the board of 5% across our plastic packaging types? So by 2025, what additional recyclate do we need to produce to meet our EPR targets? And what you can see here is we'll need an additional close to 45,000 tons of PET, an average of 35,000 tons of LD required by 2025, over and above what we produced in 2019, what we recycled in 2019, up to around 45,000 tons in LD. So you can see the range that we presented on screen. So this is the additional tonnage that we need to produce. And the average total there comes to about 113,000 tons per year of additional material that we need to produce, which is around 50 to 60% more than we produced in 2019. So there's quite some potential within the formats or within the polymer types that you see on screen in terms of the growing our recycling rates if we need to. So in terms of looking at our current recycling capacity, so current recycling capacity, and we do need more detailed information here. As you can see, I haven't included an analysis of the PET recycling capacity. We had an increase of PET bottle-to-bottle recycling capacity Last year in Johannesburg, we have online or in preparation to come online in 2023, the first bottle-to-bottle recycling in Cape Town. And we are on track in terms of being able to handle the PET recyclate needed to be recycled by the end of 2025, give or take. So in terms of the recycling capacity in the polyolefins, so that's looking at HD, LD, and PP. What you can see on screen is the recycling capacity in tons per year output in 2019, which is very roughly calculated as around 20% more than the recyclates that we produced in 2019. So there is extra capacity currently within recycling plants in the polyolefins. This is a very rough calculation. And then looking at the additional output that we need, what is the recycling capacity we need by 2025? We do need to do a deeper dive on some of this information, but what you can see on screen is that it appears that in LD, we have sufficient capacity to 2025. This does need to be verified. But in the HD and PP, we see that we do need to increase our capacity by 2025 to be able to achieve the recycling targets and the targets embedded in our EPR system. So we need a rough 30% increase in HD capacity, as well as a 70% increase in PP capacity in the country that we need to grow into by 2025. So this gives a bit of a focus in terms of investment needs, and also gives a focus in terms of, for producers on the call, these are the tonnages that I've referenced in the previous graph that need to be produced. But these tonnages can only be produced if there is a focus on design for recycling, such that we have that material available to be recycled in the country. So if we move on, the next point we need to consider in the recycling output and the process is the quality of, or the function of the material that is currently being produced. And I'm going to use HDPE as an example here. So within HDPE in South Africa, if we look at the tonnages of clear or white bottles in beverage, home, or personal care currently placed on the market, the highest circularity potential for that packaging is to recycle that packaging into clear or white home and personal care packaging on the market in South Africa. So that's the potential within that particular recyclate that's produced from HDPE clear or white bottles. What we currently see, however, is a large proportion of the packaging is currently flowing in a less than circular manner, which is still needed in other applications. But what we see is a huge proportion of that material is currently being included in flexibles, so particularly in carrier bags and unprinted, printed, colored flexibles, a large proportion of which is retail carrier bags, or into refuse bags. And as you can see, obviously in refuse bags, that's likely to be end of life. So what we have is a high quality, rigid recycled material being recycled into a flexible material. So carrier bags and refuse bags, for example, you don't need that quality of recyclate for carrier bags and refuse bags. So what we need to do is to shift the flow of material from the flexibles, almost a lower quality or a lower utility application, into the higher value application. And to do that, we need the demand to create that market and to shift the material into a much higher quality application. If we do that, there's an even higher value end of life of that material. It's more likely to be recovered and recycled, and therefore the EPR targets achieved. What we can also see is the movement of that material into other sectors. So output into other sectors, not packaging. Here we can look at agriculture, for example, into irrigation pipe. And as you can see in irrigation pipe, that's still a relatively high value product. And depending on how it's been treated through its life, can be recycled at end of life. And then looking at construction or builder's film, and then plastic wood, which is a very small market, around 4,400 or so tons per year. If we look at the construction and builder's film, the construction application, and the plastic wood, both of those products have very low value end of life, and in terms of builder's film is likely to be contaminated with concrete, etc., with cement that is being used on the film, therefore will not be recycled. And also just to note that many of these open loop recycling applications, so taking the recycled material out of packaging and into another sector, many of these applications and end markets are saturated or approaching saturation. So where we need the demand is really back into the packaging and as high value as possible to ensure we get the maximum number of cycles of that material through our economy. Then if we look at, in terms of opportunities in recycling for a circular economy and setting those up, we need that design for recyclability. So packaging with a high recyclability will have a high value end of life, meaning it's more likely to be recovered and recycled and loop again through our economy. So setting up our opportunities well is a really important component of achieving circularity and of achieving the extended producer responsibility targets. In terms of opportunities in collection and sorting, we see we will now have additional dedicated funding through mandatory EPR, mandatory extended producer responsibility, that must go hand in hand with separation at source for a better quality input, allowing a better quality output. And in terms of the way we design our system, it's embedded within our EPR legislation in terms of informal sector integration, as well as within our municipal waste management requirements, to inclusively design our system for both social and environmental benefits, so the integration of the informal sector. And we see opportunities in growing recycling capacity, with particularly highlighted a 30% at least increase needed in HDPE recycling capacity and a 70% increase in PP, as well as then to consider opportunities where we can match recycled quality in application. And we need to value our materials well by taking the quality that is produced and matching it to that end market or application. So in terms of just highlighting, when I'll now flow into my next part of the presentation, is that demand for recycled content is very key to drive our recycling rates. In most of our polymers in packaging, we've seen a lagging recycling rates, and that is largely, we can attribute that to a lack of demand for recycled content, and particularly the demand markets, which are currently ripe for the picking, which currently have excess or have a lot of potential, isn't closing that loop, isn't demand for recycled content back into packaging, which is where I'm moving on to in the next part of my presentation. So moving on to opportunities in growing recycled content in plastic packaging, just checking quickly on my time. So what are we looking at now in terms of our opportunities? And please do place questions in the chat. We do have many interesting insights from our European experts on the line. So we don't want to lose that time, that we will gain those insights. So now we're looking at demand. And when we're looking at demand for recyclate, first of all, as I emphasized, we need to look at closing the loop. So that's getting recycled content back into packaging, as well as end markets for high value products. So those are products which themselves have a high value at the end of their life and are therefore more likely to be recovered and circulated, recycled for another life cycle or many through our economy. If we look at particularly the potential in additional recycled content in selected formats, and again, I'm looking at those particular polymers which already have a high recyclability within our market, or a higher recyclability within our market. What is the potential recyclability possible, or additional recycled content possible in selected formats? The way that we devised these figures was, again, through extensive consultation in the South African Plastics Pact action groups around technically what is the possibility in specific formats, which I've aggregated here within HD, LD, PP, and PET. What is the technical potential for inclusion of recycled content with a lens of what is operationally possible? So that's quite important to note. And again, thank you to Annabi from Plastics SA for your inputs here. In the PET, you'll notice we have an average across the PET formats, which also includes food contact in the PET, of only 26%. As most of you will be aware, the potential to go much higher in PET recycled content is there. For example, we have 100% PET in water and in home care or personal care. In personal care bottles, we have 100% PET, but currently we're quite severely constrained on the demand side. So that's quite important to note. So this is the average that we've come up with in terms of recycled content back into packaging. Please note for the polyolefins, so that's HD, LD, and PP, we can't yet get recycled content back into food contact applications. So that's an opportunity we've identified for medium to long-term development. So over the next 5 years or so, and we're focusing more on the non-food contact, and we need to look at the development of food contact in other polymers. So if we look at the aggregates of this potential by the end of 2025, and factoring in a market growth of roughly 5% across most formats, what is the potential recycled content that we're looking at? And we're looking at example for another additional around 34,000 recycled content back into PET packaging, with another sort of 12 or 13% back into LD, for example. What does that translate to on aggregates? That's an additional 63,000 tons of recycled back into packaging by 2025. So that is in total then 100,000 tons of recycled material across all packaging formats by 2025, and that additional is 63,000 by 2025. So quite a significant additional input into packaging by 2025. In 2019, to give you a sense, we had 35,000 tons included in packaging as recycled content, which translated to an average 10%. So we're looking at by 2025 at least a 24% recycled content inclusion. And just a shout out here to SA Plastics Pact members, with our 30% recycled content target, we need to really solve some of the supply side issues in terms of PET, which I know Petco is working very hard on, to solve some of those supply side issues to push that recycled content higher. If we look at what this work in the current study has built on, in 2021, our target 4 action group, which is that average 30% recycled content in plastic packaging by 2025, produced a publication after extensive discussions looking at rapidly increasing recycled content in our plastic packaging, 5 quick wins. So I'll direct you to some of that, to that publication in terms of some of the specifics around the packaging formats, the opportunities, as well as the barriers that we noted for each format. So here we considered up to 25% recycled content in all PET bottles, 25% in RHB home and personal care. And to note, with the additional work done for the World Bank study with additional expert consultation, we've now pushed that in RHDPE, looking at a 35% recycled content as potential by 2025. And we already have some early movers in this space demonstrating the potential here and the feasibility. We also have 35% in RPP, recycled content in PP crates. And again, this additional work has now recommended that we move to 70% in PP crates. 70% is technically feasible. And in polypropylene, you can get a range of different products that could be recycled into PP crates. In the LDPE, we're looking at 40% LDPE in clear, that's in mattress covers and in clear LDPE applications, for example, furniture covers by the end of 2025, and then 40% LDPE in pallet wrap. Just to note that often we see the primary packaging as a focus for inclusion of recycled content. There is big potential for the inclusion of recycled content in secondary and tertiary packaging. And here we've highlighted a couple of the tertiary applications where you don't have the barriers in terms of the aesthetics of it for consumers. So it's a very important packaging format that we cannot ignore in terms of inclusion of recycled content. So moving on to my last few slides, looking at the opportunities in achieving recycled content. And what we see, just before we delve into what is actually on my slide, in terms of the barriers to include recycled content, in conversation in our action group and with additional experts beyond, is that we don't currently see big barriers across the polymers in terms of technology. So that's looking at technology at recyclers, it's looking at technology at the packaging manufacturers. We don't have big barriers in terms of technology available in South Africa. And we don't have big barriers in terms of the recycling capacity currently. It does need to grow by 2025, but we currently don't have barriers in terms of recycling capacity. And in 2020, there was additional recycling capacity available due to the strangeness of 2020, which we are seeing something of a recovery from. Where we see predominantly the biggest barriers to the inclusion of recycled content is either on the supply side, getting material into recycling plants, or on the demand side, where we don't see sufficient brand owners, producers, specifying recycled content in their products. And here we're particularly focusing on packaging. So there's something of a brand owner will. So on the PET, as referenced, we currently are very constrained in terms of supply of PET. And I think we can learn from the development journey in PET that we've seen that the early movers in specifying recycled content into the PET packaging have now access to recycled content to include into their packaging. PET is the only polymer, is the only plastic in our single-use packaging, is the only plastic currently where we have a recycled content target. And those producers that moved early now have access to recycled content, with those who were not engaged in recycled content now struggling to access that content. But across the board, we do see a constraint in supply, and there are a number of reasons for that. And a number of players are working to solve that supply side issue. Predominantly in the polyolefins, so the HDLD and PP. So there are some differences in terms of the formats that you can see on screen. But if you see the light blue bars, the demand, predominantly in the polyolefins, we see demand as the biggest barrier to growing recycled content. Some sort of happy news that I can share with you is that since we've had the extended producer responsibility legislation come into play from the end of last year, our recyclers have communicated that they've had increased demand from brand owners, in particular in closing the loop. So getting recycled content back into packaging. And we've seen additional demand now more recently with changes in prices. So what we've seen with mandatory EPR set the scene for greater demand in the polyolefins to get recycled content back into the packaging. And as I mentioned with learning from the PET journey, is what we've also heard from recyclers more recently is that once brand owners have achieved the approval process to get recycled content back into their packaging, is that they're looking to sign contracts, offtake agreements for up to 24 months with the recyclers. So again, we're seeing the early movers in the space looking to access recycled content. And what we see increasingly with that demand is that our producers are seeing to achieve their collection and recycling targets, they themselves are partly the solution by creating that demand to draw more material through the system. Also to note, as we see a development in our EPR system, there will be recycled content targets more than likely included for the other polymer types. So we will see those recycled content targets come into play. So we expect to see a lot of movement in this space over the next few years. Then if we look at, and this is my last slide now wrapping up, is we look at, if we want to look at realizing opportunities in circular plastics and in circular plastics packaging in South Africa, there's no single organization, there's no single sector that can achieve this. So if we look, for example, at the recycled content opportunity that I've just been speaking about, we find the most effective projects are those which include a close partnership between our brand owners, the packaging manufacturers, and the recyclers to achieve that recycled content target. It is a process to include recycled content targets. And again, we see the most effective projects where the recycled content target is initially quite low and then can rapidly scale once the system has been tested. So that's very important to note. We have the driver of our extended producer responsibility with increased demand for recycled content recognized now to assist in producers meeting their collection and recycling targets. We currently have within our EPR fees required in the legislation that EPR fees are designed with ease of recyclability included in the calculation of those fees. Eco-modulation in terms of designing fees, looking at ease of recyclability. What this would mean is that those packaging formats which are less recyclable in the country, so thinking of PVC and polystyrene, would then attract higher EPR fees than those which are more easily recycled in South Africa. That currently hasn't been included in the initial phase. This is very much a development phase of our EPR. There is much to put in place. There has been many changes from our voluntary to our mandatory system, but we will see eco-modulation coming into play in the coming years. It is required in our legislation. We don't yet have reuse targets in play, but as we can see, there's big moves globally to include reuse targets. We're likely to see those become more prominent. We have a block in our EPR legislation for reuse targets in the plastics. They're not yet populated. They're only currently populated for the glass, but potentially we could see reuse targets included in our senior producer responsibility legislation. So it remains for us to ask ourselves within our different organizations, within our different businesses, there are circular economy opportunities in plastic packaging in South Africa. The benefits macroeconomically do seem to be there, have been identified. We'll continue to work closely with partners to provide an even deeper evidence base so that we can move on our journey towards a circular economy for plastic packaging. But it remains to be asked, how are we going to position ourselves within this growing circular economy to both create and maintain value in a circular economy for plastics packaging in South Africa? Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Kirsten. And I think everyone can see the passion that Kirsten has, and Kirsten leading the team here at the SA Plastics Pact and all of the task groups, really deep diving to understand so that we can move forward on this journey. And what I'm excited to dive into now is, again, shifting gears into looking at how this has been done by some of our partners in Europe, and what some of the movements have been, specifically around some of these specific targets. And I would like to invite Gerrit Klein-Nagelvoort to join me. I hope my Afrikaans accent that justice. Gerrit, thank you so much for joining us online. Gerrit, the bio I have for Gerrit says that Gerrit is the Business Development Manager at Veolia Polymer. Gerrit has a chemical background. He has been active for more than 38 years in the plastics recycling sector. For 32 of those 38 years, he has been working at Veolia Polymers, active in plastics recycling for more than 50 years as an organization. He has worked as an ISO quality manager, process engineer, plant manager, but he works also with Veolia globally as a senior advisor on specifically, and this is my tongue twister for the day, polypropylene plastics recycling. So we are very excited. Thank you, Gerrit. Thank you for joining us today as well.
Thank you, Sunette, for the nice introduction, and thanks to the organizing committee for giving me a platform to tell you a bit about plastic recycling and how it can help with ecological transformation. And
ecological.
Yes, please start the video. It is about ecological transformation.
Ecological transformation means genuinely adapting our patterns of production and consumption. It means placing ecology at the heart of every process, every assessment, every decision. It means developing radical, meaningful solutions to meet humanity's existential challenges. Decarbonizing industry to combat climate warming, promoting the circular economy to combat resource depletion, decontaminating the air, water, and soil, protecting biodiversity, and creating a more resource-efficient agriculture. None of this would be possible without the coordinated action of all our stakeholders, our 180,000 employees, of course, but also our customers, our shareholders, our partners, and wider society as a whole. We're committed to delivering a multifaceted performance and convinced that economic, social, and environmental concerns must form an indivisible whole. Decontaminating, sanitizing, purifying, recycling, Recovering, conserving, and facilitating access to resources, Veolia has always worked to create solutions capable of building a better, more sustainable future for all. Today, we want to become the benchmark company for ecological transformation. Our ambition is huge, but so is our determination. Ecological transformation, that is our purpose.
Next slide, please. Yes. As you heard, Veolia has this big ambition of being the ecological transformator in the world. They are active in 3 pillars. It's water, energy, and waste. And it's a very big company. And if we zoom in on the waste, and then especially we jump into the plastic recycling, because that is the topic of today, then we see, next slide, the Veolia plastic recycling world. That means more than 1,000 employees are working on this topic, and we transform 750,000 tons of plastic waste into a new feedstock. I heard the name pass by several times, but we are working on this topic together with big organizations like the Stop Ocean Plastics Now and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Next slide, please. We are, as Veolia, in plastics recycling, mainly active in 2 hubs. It's Europe and it's Asia. And in total, we have an installed capacity of 530,000 kilotons per year, which makes us one of the biggest players on mechanical recycling. Next slide. In Europe, we have a lot of activity. We have 15 recycling plants, and in Europe, we take care of producing 290,000 tons of circular plastics. Next. The ambition is big. We want to grow from the amount we are now, 500,000 tons. We want to grow up to 800,000 tons in the year 2023. And we will serve all kinds of industries, automotive, construction and building, pallets, leisure, etc. Next. Yeah, how does the plastic recycling world look like? It's all about, we start with waste, and the waste is collected, and then from the waste there is a plastic stream extracted, and this plastic stream goes into a plastic recovery facility where it's all been sorted to different plastic types, and then it goes into the plastic recycling. And I'll show you on the next slide how this plastic recycling works. Material has been sorted by near-infrared technology, and then it goes into the plastic recycling plant. And there is normally shredded, grinded, washed, dried, and then finally it enters an extruder where we can add additives, but I'll come back to that later. Next. Plastics are, in Europe at least, but worldwide, they are very popular. In Europe alone, we consume 50 million tons of plastics, and most of them are going to packaging, what you can see here, 40%. And building and construction is also a very big consumer of plastics. Next. Yeah, it's kind of lecture about plastics, but I know the audience today already knows a lot about plastics. But you hear a lot of stories. There are hundreds of types of plastics around, which is of course not the case. In fact, it is 9 main groups of plastics, from which the biggest is polypropylene, in which we are specialized as Veolia Polymers. Next. Yeah, and then if you consume 50 million tons of plastics, you will also get a lot of waste. And this is exactly where we are aiming for. In Europe, we collect 30 million tons of plastic waste. From the 50 million, 30 million tons is collected. But what is really a pity that only 10 million tons of that is recycled. And still up to date, 20 million of that collected plastics ends up in either incinerator or landfill. So these are really the areas we are looking for, because at the moment, plastic recycling is very, very successful, and we have more demand than we can supply. So we really need to take care of the incinerators and the landfills, stop that, and go into mechanical recycling. Next. Yeah, plastics, are they a threat or are they a curse? It's still in Dutch, what the words are the saying, is it a blessing or a curse, I should say. I have a quote from Professor Kim Raggarts. He is at Circular Plastic Groups in Maastricht University, the Netherlands. And she says, okay, don't blame plastics for being plastic, because they are so tough, you can see them lying around. It's not the plastic that is a problem. It is the waste of the plastic what could cause a problem. And she also shows what are the alternatives if we would move back from plastics to the alternatives like glass, metal, paper, etc. It would be stupid to do that, because we would have 3.6 times heavier products. We would 2.2 times use more energy, and we would even create more CO2 2.7 times. So it is not really the plastic what is the problem, it's the waste of the plastic. Next. Yeah, then we jump into an AKR and Veolia Polymers, two companies active in Vroomshoop, that's located in the eastern part of the Netherlands, as already mentioned, and by the introduction, we exist for more than 50 years, and we are now specialized in PP recycling. Next slide, please. What starts with us, and I already showed you in that small infograph, the sorted bales. In this case, you see them on the picture on the left. PP packaging waste is already extracted from the plastic waste and is shipped to our washing facility. You see it on the right picture. Once the material, yeah, next please. Once the material is washed and grinded, it goes into Veolia Polymers, where it is either color sorted, flake sorting, we can pick out certain colors, and it's thoroughly tested by the laboratory. Next. Blending is very essential. You can say a lot about virgin plastic, but at least it is consistent. So that's one of the properties we needed to duplicate. And that's the reason why we have very big silos installed, 8 pieces, each containing 100,000 kilos of material. So we have a very tough blending, which is very important. Then it goes to our compounding lines, which are extruders, on which we add all kinds of additives like anti-static, UV stabilization, colorants, whatever you like, we could add it. Then it is called an RPP compound based on secondary feedstocks. We transport it to our customers by silo trucks, and then it goes to the plastic processing industry. Next. Yeah, very typical products made for 50 years already, made of recyclate, are flower pots, buckets, crates, whatever was produced of it. And that had mostly, they did that because of economical reasons. The recyclates were cheaper than the virgin plastics. So they took the recyclates because the quality was good, because otherwise they would not have taken it. And they just use it for economical reason. We already make paint buckets from it, packaging for dishwashing tablets, and even automotive took off a material from us. Next slide. But we looked into the product itself, and we made a calculation of an recycled PP. And in next slide, you see the summary of the study, which was done in 2017 in France with the big recyclers over there. And we found out that they provided data of collecting, washing, grinding, all the process. And we compared it to the production of 1 ton virgin plastic. And we had shocking results. The recycled plastic created 9 times less CO2 emission and was 9 times less energy consuming. So this is the real driver to aim for recyclate. Next. And that was done by several parties. They used the effect that the material was recycled plastic, but they also thought about the application, that the application needed to reduce CO2 as well. And these are products typically for civil engineering, building and construction. Next. First trial we had was during the London Olympics and the Queen's Out house. There was a big green field and there were some horses running around, and the Queen was afraid of yellow stains. So we needed to create a complete fundament of these crates, and that was the first proven technology. Next slide. In the Netherlands, we had an artificial playing field in the inner city for the children, where they can play football. But this has also that system of irrigation crates underneath, so you can collect rainwater once it rains, and while you vaporize the water, the system is cooled. This playing field is 26 degrees lower in temperature than a normal artificial playing field. So that's a huge winning, and that's the reason why they install it more and more. Next. Yeah, we measured it, and as you can say, numbers tell the tale. It is indeed measured, and here you see the results, minus 26 degrees. Next. Yeah, we can skip the football. Go to the next slide. Due to time limitation, but it gave you an expression what you can do with these crates. It will help you to perform the ecological transformation, especially into the cities where you have too little green. So you can use it to create the new green. And the next slide, you see all kinds of opportunities we have with these products, all made of 100% recyclate. I need to emphasize that. You can put it underneath a cycle path. You can use it for urban tree pits. And it's all about collecting water, keeping the water in the system, not to lose the water in the source system. Next. It all is based on this irrigation crate, and in the irrigation crate there is a stone wool irrigation cone which automatically transports the water from the bottom to the top without using energy. Next. And we did a very nice project for a blue-green roof in Manchester. There are a lot of office buildings and little green. There is not much green available, and we transformed the rooftop of an office building. You can see it in the next slide. With this system, we completely turned it green, and it is used for getting allowing the people to unstress, to enjoy the sun or whatever they like to do. But we created this new space. And the last slide, yeah, if you do that correctly, then you can get your flowers and your vegetation and the animals back into the city, because you give them the environment they need. Because first of all, we kicked those out, and now we invite them back, and all with this kind of sustainable product. Yeah, and that's the last slide. If we do it correctly, we are all together on the road to circular economy. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gerrit, and I think everyone will agree with me to say that this has been, it's so inspiring to see all the different applications that you have already implemented and that's already been tested and proven. And you'll see that there's a few comments in the chat. It would be wonderful if you could just maybe address some of those in your time. But thank you so much. That was exceptionally inspiring. I think some of the things that stood out for me from what you were saying, and it echoes some of the key messages that we have at the SA Plastics Pact, and that plastics is not the problem, but the plastic waste is the problem. Exactly. Our little motto that says plastics are precious, or one of the things that we're trying to do is drive the message of the value of plastics. And thank you for highlighting how you are doing that in Veolia in your context. Thank you so much. I think next up, we will hear from Fabrizio De Gregorio, deep diving a bit more into this journey to a high quality recycling and what they have been able to do in the European context as well. And then also looking at closing the loop in the context. So the biography, Fabrizio, that I received from you is Fabrizio has an honors degree in environmental science and technology and a PhD in industrial engineering, University of Naples. He has spent a long, illustrious career in research, lecturing at the University of Naples, mechanical, chemical, and biochemical processes, life cycle assessments. He's been an invited lecturer at Denmark Technology University, the Technology of Vienna. Spent 2 years R&D manager at CONAI, the Italian EPR scheme. And currently he is the technical director of Plastics Recyclers Europe and in charge of the Cyclos, which is a technical value chain initiative. And I'm sure we will hear more about that. This is with its scientific-based approach, Recyclers is supporting the value chain in advancing on recyclability and recycled content for plastics. And we look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you, Fabrizio.
Thank you very much, Silnet, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for inviting me. Currently, I will go a little bit in detail about the circular economy in Europe and this journey to high the quality of the recyclate, of the plastic recyclate. Before to dive into the topic, let me mention once again about Recyclas, that is a value chain initiative we launched under Plastic Recyclers Europe 3 years ago, that is working quite well as a value chain collaboration in Europe with more than 70 members now, brand owners, retailers, converters, recyclers, and raw material producer, working all together with a scientific approach to the plastics, recyclability and circularity. It's based on a technical committee and it's focused on design for recycling and recycled content. It's a pan-European approach. I already said that it's a scientific-based approach because at the end of the day, talking about recyclability and recycled content, it's clear that we need to have fact-based guidelines and methodology to support our plastic industry. And it's of course an inclusive platform, so everyone can be part of this initiative. But now I would like to really go a little bit in this circularity journey we have in front of us in Europe that seems to be quite complex. This is an overview of the journey, and this is exactly where we are. We are in 2022. The revision of the Packaging Waste Directive is ongoing. We have we will have the revised directive published by the European Commission in July, end of July this year, reporting the essential requirements to recycle packaging. So this is an important step forward to harmonize and standardize the design of plastic packaging all across Europe. But as you can see, we have mainly two milestones, 2025 and 2030, with multiple commitments and mandatory targets. I like to start with the bottom. So first of all, in Europe by 2025, we need to reach 50% recyclability rate target. That is impressive. Also, if I relate with the presentation we just got from Garrett, a lot of plastics, unfortunately, is not yet collected, sorted, and recycled in Europe. So this 50% seems to be very useful to stimulate the market. But we also have several others targets. Someone like the recycled content you can see on the top for PET beverage bottle is already in place, and it's coming from the single-use plastic directive. So we are really for PET beverage bottles already a little bit most advanced in this circular model. But for all the others, there are multiple commitments, mainly by the value chain, in particular by the stakeholders applying to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation global commitments, where they have committed to have all the plastic packaging reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025, with a minimum 25% of recycled plastic content. That is quite ambitious in less than 3 years now, I would say. And on the same time, in the Circular Plastic Alliance, that is another big initiative that was launched in Europe a few years ago, there is also the ambition to have 10 million tons of recycled plastic back in plastic products by 2025. At the same time, we have the plastic tax that is starting also pushing companies to use more and more recycled plastic in packaging. And this is quite important because this plastic tax started recently, the 1st of April in UK, but will start as well in Spain and in Italy and in Greece, 1st of January 2023. And I'm quite sure that other countries will do exactly the same. And more will be for 2030, where we have other targets. And in the meantime, the Commission will probably go ahead with the other mandatory targets to push our industry to move from the linear economy to the circular economy for plastics. But I think this is important because this clarifies why today we're talking about circularity. That you are probably quite familiar. At the end of the day, we are designing plastic packaging, we are placing this plastic packaging with the products on the market, but we are using just the products, so we are discarding plastic packaging in a very short period of time. And we need to ensure a reliable and robust waste management of this plastic packaging. So we need to have collection, sorting, and recycling capability in place for all the packaging types in all the European geographical area in a very short period of time to commit with the targets. And then the most important, the production of the recyclate should allow the industry to replace the uptake of virgin resources, so virgin fossil plastic, with the recycled plastics. This is particularly important because in Garrett's presentation, it was clarified that I think in the last 20 years, the plastic industry, in particular the plastic recycling industry, advanced a lot in terms of technology. And Garrett, I think, stimulated the audience today with multiple examples on how plastic can be used. But today we are really looking to a big step forward where the quality of the plastic should compete with virgin and should be used back also in packaging application. That is quite ambitious. So this is important because this can open a discussion about what is the circularity, how we have to design our packaging to claim this plastic packaging as recyclable. So I just reported here the definition of Ellen MacArthur Foundation about the circular economy, that is one restorative and regenerative by design, and aims to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value at all times. Meaning that we need to use our resources at the highest utility. So we have to avoid to compromise the material when using or when reprocessing the material, and we need to use this material for a long time. Looking at the graph applied to plastic packaging, this means that we should design the plastic packaging with closed loop in mind whenever feasible, in order to keep the highest utility and value at all times. So moving from plastic packaging one to plastic packaging one first, and so on. But because for talking about plastic, we are talking of many polymers, several applications, and in particular, so very engineered packaging on the market, so very complex one. You know that packaging are also used with for functional purpose, often for products. So when the closed loop is not possible, we need also to prefer multiple step cascade loop to open loop. This should be clear that when designing the plastic packaging, we need to guarantee in any case that the sorting, the recycling will not get hampered, and the final quality of the recycled plastic generated by the packaging will be enough high in order to replace a virgin packaging to packaging or packaging to plastic products that can, and this packaging or products should be further recycled in our society. Open loop is not a good way to design the packaging, because as you can see also from the graph, then there is no way to recycle back the material, and the material will go at the best of its possibility to energy recovery. This is important to keep in mind, because in Europe we have unfortunately still a lack of clarity about what recyclability means, how recyclability should be assessed, how the circular economy should be developed. So today I would like to clarify how it's important to harmonize the methodology behind the recyclability assessment, and how important to keep the approach as much scientific as possible. This is important for our industry because plastic is, of course, under attack. We are using too much plastic. It's a fantastic material, it's clear, but at the end of the day, we were never able to manage the plastic waste in a reasonable and environmental friendly manner. So we need to really approach the recyclability evaluation and the design for recycling guidelines in a very scientific based approach to give credibility to the claims, recyclability and recycled content claims appearing on the markets, and to provide effective communication with stakeholders, as well as having this scientific based information will provide clear direction to the design scientists and the design to the design scientists and the brands. And this is the reason why a value chain collaboration is important, because every actor of the value chain should share its technical background in order to ensure that in the next year we can better understand how packaging must be designed to perfectly fit with sorting and recycling technology, and to go back replacing virgin in a high quality application. Now I will go a little bit in the detail of recyclability first and recycling content later, starting from recyclability, but this is quite similar for recycled content, unfortunately, today. You know why today we're talking about recyclability, because whatever product is going on the market now, there is a claim or a logo reporting that the packaging is 100% recyclable or recycled, is environmental friendly, no harm to nature, and all these sustainable claims that sometimes are not based on any evidence and can just mislead the consumer. And the same is ongoing for recycled plastics. There are a lot of packaging on the market where you can see now this logo or claims on the use of recycled plastics without any third-party certification, without any fact-based approach. And unfortunately, I think this is a boomerang for our industry, because we need to give credibility to our message, but it seems to be that the marketing departments are really just looking to say to the consumers, hey guys, this packaging is designed for recycling, even though the packaging is there from 10 years and the circular economy directive was not yet in place. So talking about recyclability in a bit technical manner, you know that one of the first goals in designing packaging for the circularity is to go for monomaterial solution. But today there is still unclarity what monomaterial solution means, because talking about plastic packaging, in particular flexible but also rigids, often we have several design features in the final packaging, and inside the packaging body you can have additives, fillers, coating, barrier that you cannot see with the eyes but are inside. And also you have decoration, so you have label, you have adhesive, you have inks, and so on. So it's quite questionable to say, okay, we need to go for monomaterial, but what is a monomaterial packaging? And this is quite important. We need to approach the recyclability and this monomaterial definition in a quantitative way. And I would like to mention what Recyclass is offering from years now. We are not saying that recyclability is black and white, because of course I tried really to emphasize that assess recyclability means to also evaluate the quality of the recycled plastic that will be generated by the packaging. So the first is to create a class ranking. That is, Recyclass, for example, is from A to F, to say, okay, if you have more than 95% of monopolymer in the final packaging, counting the adhesive, the label, the inks, the barrier, the coatings, the additives, the fillers, or whatever elements you put it in your packaging, then this is the first prerequisite in a recyclability assessment to be the best in class. If you have less than 95, for example, between 90 and 95, you will start the recyclability evaluation with a B class, and so on. This is important because at the end of the day, our goal in the circular economy is to replace virgin with recyclate, and the virgin, you know, is 100% the target polymer. Second, talking about then the compatibility with recycling, it means that the residual 5 or 10% of the packaging features should be compatible with recycling, meaning that these ancillary components that are not always ancillary components should not hamper the sorting and the recycling process, and at the end of the day, they should be separable, in particular talking about the decoration, so the labels and sleeves, in particular the ones applied on natural or white containers. Otherwise, all this stuff, the printing inks, the adhesives, and so on, will go extruded with the polymer and will land in the recyclate, contaminating the recyclate, meaning that the final quality of the recyclate could not fit with the replacement of virgin in packaging application again. So in these slides, I just reported the very few tips about, for example, the decoration that are always present on packaging. So if you have decoration, of course, the preference is to have separable decoration, and the separation in the recycling process come with the washing and the flotation process. So we have washing typically for polyolefin at cold condition or mild condition, and then we have a flotation step where all the different components can get separated by density. Of course, it's important that the labels and the sleeve are not covering completely the body of the packaging, otherwise the sorting can get hampered. So if you apply, for example, a PE sleeve on a PET bottles, the near detector in the sorting lines can recognize the PET bottles as PE. That is a drama, because then the PE bottles will not get recycled at all. In terms of colors, I always have in mind that in webinars, conferences, people say, I don't care in colors, I don't care in the effect of printing pigments in a recyclability assessment. This is unfortunately a really big lack of knowledge for our industry. I can tell you that all the pigments and binders used in inks and the lacquers can really have a strong effect on the quality of the recyclate. So our suggestion is, of course, always to minimize the use of inks, lacquers, adhesive, and to go for a specific chemistry. I don't want now to go too much in the detail, but also to prefer light colors instead to dark colors, because this is important once again for the sorting, but also for the final color of the recyclate and its application. All this information in Recyclas, for example, are fact-based, because the design for recycling guidelines we have in place in Recyclas that are built up by the technical committees, where we have huge participation by all the value chain actors, are coming from testing campaigns where we are testing samples, applying a standard testing protocol to prove that the quality of the recyclate can be useful in used in closed loop application, replacing virgin. And this is, for example, how the Recyclas guidelines for natural HDP containers and tubes looks like. So you can see that there are a lot of information. These information are mainly coming from the testing campaigns we carried out. You can dive on the Recyclas website, where all the Recyclas design for recycling guidelines are available. This is the typical approach, traffic light approach. So in green, you have the full compatibility with recycling, so the best in class. In the conditional, the limited compatibility with recycling, meaning that even not perfectly designed for recycling, these are still packaging that are aligned in terms of recyclability and quality of recycled plastics with the circular economy. And then in red, you have both the low compatibility as well as the no compatibility. And in Recyclas, you can also play with the tool we have online. It's a free online tool where all the information from the guidelines are presupposed into. So you can play with the tool and have a self-assessment of your plastic packaging fact-based. We have also developed a very complex, I would say, for me, that I was part of the development process. It's a very complex methodology we have developed, but it's very easy to be used for assessing plastic packaging recyclability, but also to certify third-party the recyclability of plastic packaging. And this is again available online, and this is an example for clear HDP bottle. Of course, in this example, you have an HDP bottle provider with a PEPP trigger spray, so just polyolefin side. We have decided in this case study to show one that is available on the market, so where paper label are applied, even though paper label are not the best in class. And you can see that in order to really assess the recyclability, looking at the right side of the slides, how the methodology work, we need to have data. because if we do not have reliable and detailed data about how the packaging is designed, it will be always very difficult to have a very detailed and robust recyclability assessment. But I don't want to go into detail, but this is just to look on how a good recyclability methodology works. First of all, we need to ensure that the packaging material is collected, sorted, and recycled in specific geographical area if we are assessing the recyclability, for example, in Germany, in Italy, or if we are assessing the recyclability all across Europe, because we like to use this pan-European approach. If this collection and sorting and recycling capability are there, then we can start with the recyclability analysis, and point number 3, criterion number 3, is the recyclable plastic content evaluation. This is the first, because we need really to check how much of the target polymer is in the packaging. And then we can check, first of all, the sortability. We have a sorting protocol in Recyclass that is applied at industrial scale or pilot scale, really to prove, in particular for specific packaging design, if the packaging is sortable or not sortable, and with the efficiency of sorting this packaging in the right stream. And then criterion number 5, it's really related to the compatibility with recycling. So at this stage, we are checking all the packaging features that are separable from during the recycling process, and all the ones that are not separable and will land in the recyclate. And then the results and other criteria in our approach that is also about the product left, because at the end of the day, when wasting the packaging, we need to also take in consideration that sometimes the packaging is not designed to assess or to use all the products. So part of the product sometimes can still be there when the packaging is entering in the recycling process. Now I will go a little bit also in the detail of the recycled content, and it is the consequence of the design for recycling for plastic packaging. So if yesterday we was able already to place in the market packaging already designed for recycling, that is not the case, as you know, in most of the plastic packaging on the market. Instead to use recycled plastic in plastic products like chair or like injection molding application, plastic benches, and so on. Probably we were already able to replace virgin in packaging, but this is not yet the case today. But talking about recycling capacity and recyclate production, this is, I think, a useful slide for you, because what is happening in Europe in the last year is quite impressive. This is fully related what was Garrett was mentioning. The recycling capacity, in particular in the last 8 years, tripled, moving from 3 million tons to 8.5 million tons in 2019. Now is approaching 10 million tons for plastic packaging. And if you look in particular at the recyclate production, 20 years ago, it was more or less 1 million ton. And in 2019, in particular, if you look between 2014 and 2019, in less than 5 years, more than double recycled plastics were offered to the market. As Garrett was mentioning, the main driver, of course, was the price. Currently, in 2021, the recycled plastic production reached already 6 million tons. And we see that this production, as well as the capabilities for plastic recycling, are both increasing, not linearly, but this is really because of the multiple commitments I emphasized in the first slides, talking about the circularity journey, and also because now the legislator in Europe is really putting a lot of pressure on our industry. Talking about the market trends, this is important because, the new recycling capacity is continuously growing, and we expect to have more and more for 2025 and 2030. In particular, if you compare 2020 with the 2025 and 2030, you can see that in less than 10 years, we will have more than double of the recycling plastic capacity. This is important. This is important in Europe because by 2025, so in less than 3 years, we need to collect all the plastic packaging on the market. And looking at the intention of the Commission with the revision of the Packaging Waste Directive, I would say also that to respect the essential requirements, so to respect the design for recycling and the standardization that is ongoing in Europe now, all the packaging placed on the market between 2025 and 2030 on the European market should be really designed for recycling, meaning that there will be, of course, more and more interest for investors in investing in mechanical recycling, but also looking at the middle long term, also in new sorting and chemical recycling technologies. But about the recycled content, today it's important to say that there are particularly legislative and market developments in Europe, because of course consumer would like to be reassured about the plastic packaging, and there is this intention, of course, talking about sustainability claims to reduce the carbon footprint of plastic packaging, but I would say also in particular to reduce the packaging that are wasted and not recycled back in our society. The implementation of the plastic tax that already happened in UK 10 days ago will start also in the next years. And I see that, for example, in Spain and in Greece, for example, they are already asking to have a third-party certification for recycled content, because we cannot just believe in self-claim, and consumers also need to be ensured that when they are buying plastic packaging claiming 20, 30, 40% of the recycled content inside, they should know where this recycled plastic is coming from, if this is post-consumer, this is post-industrial, this is internal recycling. So if the claim is on the scrap of the process, and if this recycled content is realistically inside the packaging or not, because I can tell you that 90% of the plastic packaging on the market claiming the use of recycled plastic do not have recycled plastic inside. And it's also important to underline and to stress that the challenges and risk for recycled content, talking about claims or talking about methodology to assess the use of the recycled content, are mainly two: the self-declaration of the origin of waste, because of course there is a huge difference between the use of post-consumer respect to the use of post-industrial, or the use of byproducts, I would say, where byproducts are not at all recycled. Post-industrial should be differentiated respect to post-consumer, because post-consumer means that inside the packaging there is some plastics that is coming from packaging. So it's really ensuring the consumer that a closed loop is already in place. And also this free allocation, it's really important, because we need to ensure that at the end of the day, the percentage of recycled content claimed by the brand owners and the retailers when selling the products will be realistic. So if I will do an analysis on the packaging, I will find exactly the percentage of recycled content claimed. That unfortunately is not the case today. So we need to have a robust and detailed approach to avoid to have this use of recycled content pushed back by the consumer and to avoid to have greenwashing on the market. To move forward, we have worked a lot in last year to reassure the consumers, in particular in both Plastic Recyclers Europe and in Recyclas, where we have built a recyclability audit scheme and recycled content audit scheme. The recycled content is already accredited, European accredited, the 17065, where first we are checking the origin of the material. So we are auditing the recyclers. There are roughly 300 plastic recyclers already audited, and transparently, the list is transparently published online on the Userplast website. But this is really important because talking about recycled plastics, we need to have a chain of custody approach. And chain of custody and traceability approach means that we need to check step by step all the value chain actors using recycled plastics, starting from recyclers. So when we have the recyclers audited, we can guarantee that when in the next steps, compounding, reprocessing, and so on, converting and so on, the PCR or the PIR are highlighted in the certification, but also the quality of the recycled plastics is considered in the certification. And finally, we cannot believe in this free allocation, because this is really risky. You know, in a production line, you are producing typically not just one product or one packaging, but multiple packaging. So the free allocation today allow packaging producer and user to claim that in their line, during 1 year, they used, I don't know, a certain amount of recycled plastics, and then they are allowed to claim that in packaging, whatever packaging was produced by the line, there is a certain amount of recycled plastics. But probably some of these products produced in the line do not contain at all these recycled plastics. So in Recyclas and PRE, we are suggesting to use a controlled blending chain of custody approach to really ensure that the final claim and the final mark on the packaging will be consistent with the amount of recycled plastics in packaging and products. And finally, this is my last slide. I know that probably it's too early today to talk about how the use of recycled plastics can also hamper the recyclability, but it's important to keep in mind the circularity definition. As society, we need to move to a circular economy model, not only for plastics, but for whatever resources we are using. Meaning that for plastics, when reintroducing recycled plastics in packaging, for example, or in other products, but I would like to refer mainly in packaging, that is the final target of the circular economy model, we need to avoid to disturb the recyclability of the packaging. So in these slides, I try to emphasize, for example, 3 of the main area where I see not a good use of recycled plastics in packaging. First of all, the use of gray uncolored recyclate as internal or inner layer in multi-layer packaging. This is typically for rigids, where inner layer are made by recyclate and the color is gray or black, and then externally the packaging is white or transparent. And this is of course not good, because then for example, a white packaging once recycled will generate black recyclate that of course it cannot be offered to the market to replace the same polymer in the same application, but should go, for example, talking about HDP in piping or other application. The use of natural or white recyclate as internal or inner layer of colored packaging as well. And that is important because, of course, we need to preserve the use of natural and white recyclate, natural and white are the most valuable materials. So when designing packaging natural or white, we need to ensure, first of all, that all the decorative stuff will be separated in order to avoid the discoloration. But then when using recycled plastics in this natural or white, we need also to ensure that the final color of the packaging will be natural or white. Otherwise, it will become more and more difficult to have these multiple step cascaded in our society. And the last one is the use of master batch to color natural white recyclate. I'm aware that this is already a common practice where most in particular, this is for rigids, PP and HDP, most of the packaging on the market are colored. Mass coloration is applied. So when using high quality recyclate like the natural or the white at a very high price, then there is this coloration of natural and white, meaning that the natural and white recyclate will never go in natural or white application again. Probably it's too much early to talk about this, but the circularity is really a journey. We need to start to approach the matter in a very scientific and reliable way. But of course, we need to also think about the consequences on using the recycled plastics in this application to avoid then to hamper the recyclability. Thank you.
Excellent. Fabrizio, I wish you could see in the background, Kirsten was clapping, and we have a lot of very, very positive responses in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing a volume of insights. Super, super insightful. We will be sharing all of these presentations with all of the participants. Thank you once again to all of our speakers that have joined us. We have run out of time for today's session, but from just a quick wrap up from our side, I think some of the key themes that have come through, the value of this material, and that we cannot afford to waste it, that this is a global responsibility as highlighted by all of our speakers, that we can see that there are very clear targets in the South African context and the European context. There are creative and practical solutions that are already being implemented. They are proving their feasibility, and we can look at their scaling, and we can look at their applications in different contexts. And once again, the ecosystem of partners that are working really hard to find economically viable and environmentally sustainable solutions. So from our side, thank you very much. I'm going to hand back over to Kirsten to just wrap us up for today.
Thank you very much, Solnette, and thank you so much to all our speakers for this session. We really do appreciate your time, and thank you for your engagement from the audience. Please do be in contact with us if there's anything specific you'd like to engage in further. We're happy to make further links in the network. And just as a closing slide, we'd love to point you to one of our members' conferences. Excuse me while I lose my notes. We'd love to point you to one of our member conferences. Our partners at the Sustainable Seas Trust are gearing up for their second international conference of the African Marine Waste Network. The conference will take place the 23rd to the 27th of May in Port Elizabeth or Nelson Mandela Bay in South Africa. The overarching objective is to collaboratively discuss, scrutinize, and inclusively improve the draft guidebook for regional national action plans with a decision-making framework to manage plastics in Africa. Sustainable Seas Trust has also hosted a preliminary webinar series looking at various aspects of the plastic value chain to feed into the draft guidebook. You're invited to join this action-packed conference, which seeks to fundamentally shift how waste is viewed and managed in Africa. Please do feel free to contact Sustainable Seas Trust or ourselves for more information. Thank you so much for your time, and all the best.